in my travels around the world and back in New Zealand here, I've seen a lot of people sort of, I don't know, it's quite embarrassing really, itching their ass, you know what I mean, in public. Now this little problem could be just people having nothing to do, or they could be any one of the 3 billion people on this planet whose bowels are infected with intestinal worms. Now, as you can see, these little suckers are really ugly little fellas, and they cause a lot of trouble. In the tropics, you can get intestinal tapeworms that are really big, a number of feet long. So you're not looking at these things under a microscope, they are big. Fortunately though, in New Zealand, we don't tend to get big tapeworms like this. The most common intestinal worm in New Zealand are threadworms like this. Again, you can see them. You don't need a microscope. And I'll tell you what, they're real ugly. Look at this. Now these worms can cause a variety of symptoms. You can get a tummy ache, you might be a bit bloated, you could burp a lot, you could fart a lot, and likewise you can also get this very embarrassing itchy bottom, which you'd start doing unconsciously and people start talking about you know what I mean? Now the question is, how do you get them? These worms are located right throughout a community, in dirt, in bad food, poor hygiene, they're in sort of sewage systems. They are very commonly infesting dogs and cats, so you get it in their sort of dog and cat poos really. So people rolling around with their dog or with poor hygiene, not washing their hands after the toilet, they tend to get them. Most kids get a dose of worms when they're younger, and what's interesting is, in actual fact, it doesn't seem to be a bad thing, because there's been some recent research that if a kid does pick up worms in the sandpit, then they're less likely to get some of the allergic conditions like asthma and stuff. So that's interesting, isn't it? Maybe our kids are a little bit too clean in these modern times. Anyway, treatment is simple. You go down to the chemist and you say you want to deworm the family, and they'll give you stuff like what's called Vermox is one of them, and there's a few others as well, and you simply take the tablet and that clears all the worms out. So most families in New Zealand should have a dose every couple of years. But then again, there are alternative ways of getting rid of intestinal worms, like I couldn't condone them, but apparently my grandmother told me that one way of getting rid of worms in your gut is to use a bit of fruitcake. I said, well, Grandma, what do you actually do to get rid of worms using fruitcake? She said what she'd do is she'd bend over Granddad, get his trousers off and bend him over, and for about a week, every night, she'd shove a bit of fruitcake up his bum, you know what I mean? And this would become a habit. After about a week, she would bend him over and stand there with a knife. She wouldn't put fruitcake up his bum. And what invariably happened was the worm would poke its head out and say, hey, where's the fruitcake? And cut the worm's head off. There you go.